Welcome to our video presentation about our online library instruction at the University of North Georgia during COVID-19, which we have titled Friday the 13th, Part 2020, because it was initially a horror, but we managed to survive. So my name is Amanda Nash. I am one of the Assistant Deans of Libraries at the University of North Georgia. I'm based out of the Gainesville campus, and I'm here talking with you with one of my colleagues, who I'll let introduce herself.
My name is Angela McGaw, and I'm a reference services librarian at our Dahlonega campus. And for those of you not familiar with the University of North Georgia, we're located in 5 different locations: Dahlonega, Gainesville, Cumming, Oconee, and Blue Ridge.
Yeah, we are sort of spread across North Georgia. And I think it's important if you understand not just the way we're physically structured as a university, but what our situation was in terms of library instruction at UNG prior to the big switchover in March. Of course, that word came down on Friday the 13th that within 2 weeks we would be moving instruction at the university entirely online. And so the classes were going online, so library teaching needed to go online as well. Prior to COVID, we really did not do much online library instruction, not in terms of what we did for classes or for individuals. And then, of course, post-COVID, we've moved entirely online for our instruction components. Classroom teaching, we had a handful of requests every semester, handled largely by Angela because her faculty had more online course sections, but for the most part, our online classes just did not request library instruction sessions. We also do individual instruction, reference by appointment. That too was entirely face-to-face prior to this big switch in March. One of the additional challenges to the fact that our library instruction was not online prior to this was our teaching faculty across the campuses and across the disciplines did not do a lot of online instruction. They might teach a class here and there, but face-to-face courses had no online component. If they wanted to use D2L to present like a syllabus or a course calendar, that kind of thing, that was not something that you automatically got if you were teaching a face-to-face course. You had to request a course shell. So our classroom faculty did not have a lot of experience working in that environment either. So libraries, not used to this, classroom faculty not used to this, and we had that combined with a mandate from our administration that we really needed to avoid synchronous instruction, if at all possible, during this new situation, because they were a little worried we'd break the internet if we did too much live face-to-screen teaching during this time. So that might make a simple switch, and that was just not going to be readily available to us. So that was the situation we were given. And you know the expression about making life giving you lemons and needing to make lemonade. That's what we had to do, was figure out a way to turn this challenge into an opportunity. The first thing we had to do was figure out what we're up against. And so we had to figure out how much instruction was left for us to do through the course of that spring semester. I've talked with colleagues at other USG institutions, and they only had a handful of sessions still on the books at mid-March. We were in a completely different situation. We had 36 classes left to teach across 4 different campuses, and so we were going to have to figure out a way to really gear up and gear up fast to be able to handle that kind of demand. So I think let's move to the next slide.
So we hit the ground running in lots of different ways. The first thing we did is our marketing team decided to create a Keep Calm and ad campaign on our library's webpage and on social media. We did have one online service. We had a chat service that was already in place, but our research consultations, instruction, and other services had to go completely online. So I was really proud of their campaign. I thought it was really well done. That was going on, that was being created while we were in the midst of creating COOP teams. Our library likes acronyms a lot. This was the teams, the name that we came up with, the continuity, and I never can say that word right, I'm sorry, of operation planning. That's the reason why I like COOP. This was teams that each of the divisions created, and within the reference and instruction team, we had 2 different teams created. The first thing we did before we met as teams is we did that instruction need. We created a document that listed all the instruction requests that we had. I was in an unusual situation where I worked very closely with certain faculty, and literally on Friday the 13th, when the mandate came down, I had an email immediately from my nursing faculty who had instruction scheduled for that next week going, what are we going to do? But most of us had to reach out to other instructors. So we spent the first couple of days reaching out to all those instructors saying, yes, we will do instruction for you. Let us know if you still want it. We also created a document called Suggestions and Discoveries, which we sort of was a working document that as you ran across things that worked really well or didn't work really well, to sort of let the rest of the team know. We did create the 2 teams that we divided into, because we're a pretty large faculty. We divided into 2 teams, one called Online Instruction Resources, and the other team looked at research consultations and conducting online sessions. Amanda did a fabulous job of dividing us between people who had experience and people who didn't have experience. We have a couple of librarians like myself who actually have degrees in instructional technology, and then we have faculty who had the only experience they had with D2L, our online learning management system, was when they were working on their tenure and promotion portfolios. So we had a wide range of experience levels, and so we did a really good job of mixing those people up as we were developing these materials. So our deliverables in 2 weeks were to create these guides. And so the first team created a guide of online instruction resources. So that basically provided guidance about our platforms, about how to put material into D2L, how to use Kaltura, which is the University of North Georgia's recording and software that we also use for captioning videos. We also looked at Satori as well as another way of building information. The other team created 2 documents. We created a guide to online instruction sessions, which we gathered best practice tools. We looked at material provided by the university system that they were producing during this time. We looked at things produced by DEDI, which was our local, I forget, what does DEDI stand for? It's Department of...
Don't ask me.
Department of Education Technology Integration, I believe is what it stands for.
That sounds
basically,
right.
They're our team of D2L experts, of our course developers. We also looked at material produced by ALA and some of the other library organizations that were also scrambling to produce material to educate librarians about how to do instruction virtually online. So we looked at all these different things. We came up with a list of best practices, and then we looked at tools. And so we started at the baseline of everybody knew how to use PowerPoint. So how do you narrate a PowerPoint and record it? So that was we knew everybody could accomplish that. So we did instructions about how to do that. And then we went to using our online D2L software, which is Collaborate for synchronous learning. We also looked at Teams and Skype for some of this as well. The university libraries had just adopted Teams as a platform for use. In fact, our administration, Amanda was one of those lucky people who had just had instruction about how to use Teams as their platform.
1 week before.
1 week before. And so we were fortunate on my team that worked on this document had one of those administrators who so we were using Teams to communicate. We were doing all of this virtually. That was what was really challenging about this, is that we were creating online instruction and online materials while we were ourselves online. So it was a
That's
great learning
great point,
process.
Angela.
Um, the third guide, we also in that instruction guide, even though we knew we weren't teaching, we were sort of not encouraged to teach synchronously, but we also wanted to provide some synchronous tools. So we also looked at Poll Everywhere, Kahoot, Flipgrid, GoFormative, some of the other online tools that we knew that would help, because our instruction is really, our face-to-face instruction was very, very active learning based. And so that was when we were really trying to make sure that we included in both our synchronous and our asynchronous, what were some ways that we could build in some interactivity to our students. So SoftChalk was also another piece of software that we explored during that online instruction session document. Our virtual research consultations now had to be virtual, all our reference transactions. So we also created a document looking at various platforms and best practices for doing conversations online. And so we looked at the three that our university at the time supported, which was Collaborate, Teams, and Skype. We also did a real brief how to use Google Hangouts just in case everything else broke. We knew most of our students knew how to use Google Hangouts, so we also provided that kind of instruction. So those were the things that we were working on during those 2 weeks, and those documents we're in the midst of now looking at how to update and continue using those.
So in the end, how did this all work out? I think we could call it a big success. There were hiccups along the way and some stressful times, but for the most part, we achieved what I would describe as what will be a long-term transformation, and basically crammed it into 2 weeks' time. And Angela made an excellent point that we were doing all of this gearing up to teach online, entirely online. So that added an extra kind of learning curve for us as well. So I can't thank our research and our reference and instruction faculty enough here in the libraries, with Angela in particular for herding cats in her very large group. My group was much smaller, and we accomplished an awful lot, and I'm proud of everyone for making this tremendous shift. In the end, you'll recall we had 36 sessions on the books. After reaching out to everyone, after adopting all of these new tools and platforms, we ended up with only one cancellation. Not only that, we had 4 additional requests come in over that time. So we did 39 sessions from mid-March shut down to the end of the semester, which is pretty darn impressive, I think. And every fellow librarian in the state that I've told that to has been kind of blown away by that. We managed to limit our number of synchronous sessions to only 8, which I think was pretty successful and effective. Some faculty really wanted to maintain that synchronous kind of interactive approach, but we were able to keep it very manageable. The rest, the other 31 we did, were entirely either asynchronous video that we created or other materials that were created or curated from things we already had, and then kind of packaged and delivered to them for upload to D2L. And I think that's one of the reasons that we were so successful, because as Angela said, her nursing faculty, which again were a group of faculty that already had a little bit of experience with online instruction with the libraries and Angela, I think a lot of our teaching faculty were just shell-shocked with that March 13th closure, and then 2 weeks to gear up to move their classes entirely online.
They were thankful for us to do a session for them.
Yes, they needed content. And we reached out to them individually and emailed them or called them or spoke to them somehow and said, hey, we can give you content. And so I think that we took advantage of what could have been a very stressful time and kind of turned it into a successful outcome. I think that the changes to moving online had some long-term implications too, in terms of how we're doing reference and instruction going forward. Of course, summer stayed entirely online class-wise, so our instruction did as well. Fall 2020, we're back in face-to-face classes, but they're more of a hybrid situation in order to be able to maintain social distancing in the classrooms. And so a class that normally would meet 3 times a week, that class may be divided into 3 sessions, and the students come on different days. That was going to be challenging to manage in terms of sending librarians into those classrooms. So we have remained fully online for fall 2020, and we most likely will stay online for spring 2020 as well, 2021 as well, because we're going to continue that kind of hybrid structure going forward. Moving our library instruction online has meant we've changed how we've staffed those. Rather than being limited to just the librarians located at your particular campus, now any librarian is free to teach for a particular class. And it means that, or to do a particular research consultation, which means that everyone has been able to develop and enhance everyone had a subject expertise based on where they collected for the libraries and other teaching experiences, but we've really been able to maximize that. It also, we're able to maximize how many sessions we can offer because we've just got more people to deliver them, and it's easier for our students when they want an appointment because they can do that from home. They don't have to make the trek onto campus and find a parking space and do all of that. So it has provided a lot of opportunities for us in terms of staffing and scheduling as well. It also has sort of changed our mindset in a lot of ways. I think that before we did things as a faculty together. We tried to approach things as one unified library, but when you are working geographically in one location, you think about that location. Now we're having to think globally and think across the campuses because you never know where your class that you're teaching for or the student that you're working with is going to, what their home campus is. So it really has moved us to a more unified way of thinking. And going forward, those wonderful documents that our librarians put together, those need to grow. We've added Zoom at UNG, so we're adding that to our set of tools, and we need to move away from Word docs for those to find a more fluid and interactive way to provide that information. So that's our next challenge. But I think that gives you a sense of how we managed Friday the 13th, Part 2020. So
I think the biggest lesson we learned, at least from the librarian's perspective, is that teaching online, even though it's challenging, is similar to face-to-face. When you're doing a recording, if you flub up a word here or there, that's okay because you're going to flub up a word in face-to-face as well. So I think that was one of the biggest lessons that we learned, is that when you're creating material, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be, ideal. It just needs to share. You just need to make sure that they get the content that they need. And having learned that lesson, I think as our experience grows and we get to do more and more, we'll become better and better at it. So I'm excited about the changes that have happened. I think it was scary at first, but I think it's been a positive thing.
I agree wholeheartedly. So Angela's got a slide with our contact information here. If you've got any questions for us, if you'd like to learn more about what we did and how we did it, you've got our email addresses. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video.